A lone Terran battleship drifted through the void, its hull scarred, its weapons silent. The crew inside was weary but unbroken. For decades, humanity had been under the crushing rule of the Zalari Dominion, an empire of conquerors who viewed humans as nothing more than a resource to exploit. The Dominion had stripped Earth of its sovereignty, forcing its people into servitude across 100 worlds. But humanity was not broken. Deep within the ship, Captain Elias Ward stood before his crew, his gaze burning with determination. "We have one chance," he said. "If we fail here, the rebellion dies with us." The rebellion had been a flicker of hope in the darkness, growing stronger with every stolen ship, every hidden outpost, every act of defiance. The Dominion had crushed many uprisings before, but never had they faced something like humanity, a species that refused to kneel no matter the cost. The ship, the Valiant, was on a desperate mission deep into the heart of Dominion space. Their target was the Dominion Central Command Relay, a massive station that controlled fleet movements across the entire sector. If they could destroy it, the Dominion's forces would be thrown into chaos. Elias turned to his chief engineer, Lieutenant Kira Vaughn. "How much time until we reach the relay?" 3 hours if they don't spot us," she said grimly. "We're flying dark, but if they catch wind of us before we get there, we're done." Elias nodded. Every second counted. They couldn't afford to fail. The Dominion had wiped out entire colonies for less. In the barracks, soldiers prepared for battle, checking weapons, strapping on armor. None of them spoke much. They knew what was at stake. They were the best humanity had left, and they would fight to the last man if needed. In the command center, Elias watched the viewscreen as the relay station came into view. It was a fortress heavily guarded with Dominion warships patrolling its perimeter. Vaughn cursed under her breath. "We're going to have to punch through." Elias activated the comms. "Attention all hands, this is it. We're taking the fight to them. We either win here or we die trying." The Valiant surged forward, engines flaring as its stealth systems dropped. The Dominion fleet reacted instantly, alarms blaring across the station as ships turned to intercept them. Elias gritted his teeth. "Fire everything." The Valiant's cannons roared to life, beams of searing energy cutting through the void, tearing into Dominion vessels. Fighters swarmed around them, but the ship's point defense systems cut them down as the crew fought with desperate intensity. A shockwave rocked the ship as a Dominion cruiser landed. "A direct hit, shields are failing," one of the officers called out. Elias gripped his console. "Hold the line." The ship weaved through the enemy formation, dodging fire while its own weapons carved a path toward the station, but the Dominion fleet was too large. The Valiant couldn't last long in a direct fight. Elias turned to Vaughn. "We need another way." She hesitated, then her eyes widened. "If we overload the core, we could ram the station. It won't just take out the relay, it'll take out half their fleet." Elias exhaled slowly. He looked around at his crew. They had known this mission was a death sentence, and yet none of them hesitated. "Do it," he ordered. In engineering, Vaughn and her team worked frantically. The ship's core whined as it was pushed beyond its limits, alarms blaring. The Dominion forces realized too late what was happening. The Valiant surged forward, cutting through the last line of defenses. On the bridge, Elias watched as the massive structure of the relay station grew closer. The Dominion's fleet opened fire in desperation, but it was too late. The Valiant slammed into the station's core. A blinding explosion erupted outward, tearing through Dominion ships, sending debris hurtling in every direction. The station cracked apart, its control systems failing. Across the sector, Dominion ships lost coordination, confused and leaderless. The human resistance hidden among the stars saw their chance and struck, rising up in rebellion. On the wreckage of the station, a single escape pod drifted away, carrying the last survivors of the Valiant. Elias, Vaughn and a handful of crew watched as their sacrifice ignited the greatest uprising humanity had ever seen. The battle for freedom had begun. The escape pod drifted through the debris field, its occupants silent as they watched the aftermath of their desperate gamble. The Dominion fleet was in chaos, their command relay reduced to a burning wreck. Elias Ward clenched his fists. They had dealt a crippling blow, but it wasn't over. The Dominion would regroup, and when they did, they would come down on humanity with a vengeance. Vaughn worked feverishly at the controls, trying to get a signal out. The pod was running on emergency power, its systems barely holding together. "We need to reach the resistance," she muttered. "They need to know what we did." Elias turned to the others. 5 of them had survived. Some were wounded, all were exhausted. But there was no time for rest. The Dominion would send search teams soon, and if they were found, the rebellion would lose its leaders. The console crackled to life. A distorted voice came through. Unknown vessel, identify yourself. Vaughn's hands flew over the controls. This is Lieutenant Vaughn of the Valiant. We have Captain Ward and survivors on board. Mission accomplished. Requesting immediate extraction. A pause. Then a response. Coordinates incoming. Stay low. Dominion patrols are everywhere. Elias exhaled. The Resistance had received their message. Now they just had to survive long enough to get there. Hours passed as the pod drifted through the wreckage. The glow of burning ships cast eerie shadows inside. Then the sensors blared a warning. Dominion patrol incoming. Elias cursed. They had to move. Vaughn fired up the emergency thrusters, sending the pod into a slow descent toward a nearby asteroid field. If they could hide among the rocks, they might have a chance. Through the viewport, they saw the patrol ship moving closer, scanning the debris. The Dominion wasn't just looking for survivors. They were making sure no one escaped. The pod trembled as Vaughn guided it into a dense cluster of asteroids. The damaged thrusters sputtered, barely responding. Elias could feel every breath of his crew, every heartbeat. If the Dominion found them now, it was over. The patrol ship passed above them, its spotlights sweeping the wreckage. The pod remained motionless. Vaughn had cut all power, leaving them adrift. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then, just as the ship moved on, an alert flashed. Incoming transmission. Elias' blood ran cold. The Dominion had detected them. The pod's comm system crackled. Surrender immediately. There is no escape. Vaughn's hands flew to the controls. We have one shot, she whispered. We fire the emergency thrusters, slingshot off the asteroid, and pray they don't blast us out of the sky. Elias nodded. Do it. The pod jolted as Vaughn activated the thrusters at full burn. The asteroid behind them shattered under the force, sending a shockwave through space. The patrol ship reacted instantly, weapons charging. The pod rocketed through the asteroid field, dodging incoming fire. The Dominion ship pursued, faster and more maneuverable. Elias watched the distance counter tick down. They were close to the rendezvous, but they wouldn't make it in time. Then the Resistance arrived. From the darkness, 3 human warships emerged, their cannons lighting up the void. The lead ship, a battle-worn destroyer, unleashed a barrage that struck the Dominion vessel head-on. The enemy ship buckled under the assault, breaking apart in a cascade of fire and debris. The pod shuddered as it was pulled into the Resistance ship's hangar. The doors sealed behind them, and the crew collapsed in relief. They had made it. As Elias stepped out, a familiar figure approached. Commander Adrian Cole, leader of the Resistance. You did it, Cole said, his voice filled with something Elias hadn't heard in a long time. Hope. Elias nodded. The relay is gone. The Dominion is blind. Cole grinned. Then it's time to strike. The battle for freedom was far from over. But for the first time, humanity had the upper hand. Deep within the Resistance warship, Elias Ward stood in the command center, watching the chaos unfold across Dominion-controlled space. The destruction of the relay station had shattered their coordination. Dominion ships scrambled to establish new communication links, their once unstoppable fleets suddenly vulnerable. It was the perfect moment to strike. Commander Adrian Cole turned to him. We've intercepted enemy transmissions. They're struggling to regain control, but it won't last. We need to hit them now before they recover. Elias nodded. What's our next target? Cole tapped on the display, bringing up a hologram of a massive Dominion fortress orbiting a barren world. Outpost Zeta 9. One of their largest military installations. If we take it, we cripple their operations in this sector. Vaughn studied the map, her brow furrowed. That place is a fortress. Even with their fleet in disarray, their defenses are still strong. Elias exhaled. They had won a major victory, but now came the real war. Every Dominion officer with a grudge against humanity would be rallying to crush the rebellion. They needed more than just tactics. They needed an advantage. Cole smirked. We have something that might help. He led Elias and Vaughn through the ship's corridors to a hidden bay. The doors slid open, revealing a stolen Dominion warship. Unlike the crude human vessels, this was sleek, deadly, and bristling with advanced technology. Vaughn's eyes widened. You stole a Dominion ship? Cole grinned. Not just any ship. This is a Phantom-class infiltration vessel. Stealth capabilities, advanced hacking systems, and weapons strong enough to punch through their hulls before they even know we're there. Elias stepped forward, running his hand over the cold metal. This could get us inside the outpost. That's the plan, Cole confirmed. You and a strike team infiltrate, disable their shields, and we bring in the fleet to finish the job. Elias looked at Vaughn. She nodded. It was risky, but they had no other choice. 2 hours later, the Phantom-class ship slipped through space, its cloaking systems masking its presence. Elias sat in the cockpit, his fingers tightening around the controls. They were heading straight into the Lion's Den. The fortress loomed ahead, bristling with turrets and fighter patrols. The Phantom glided through undetected, its systems working flawlessly. They approached the lower docking bay, and Vaughn activated the override codes stolen from the Dominion databanks. We're in, she whispered as the hangar doors slid open. Elias and his team disembarked, weapons drawn. The hangar was eerily quiet. They moved swiftly, taking out isolated guards with silenced shots. If they raised an alarm, it was over. They reached the command center, where Dominion officers frantically worked to restore communication across the sector. Elias signaled his team. On my mark. Explosions rocked the station as they opened fire. The Dominion soldiers barely had time to react before the humans cut through them. Vaughn rushed to the control panel, working fast. Shields are down, she reported. Elias activated his comm. Cole, bring in the fleet. The Resistance warships emerged from hyperspace, unleashing a devastating barrage. The Dominion station shook as their defenses crumbled. Fighters scrambled to launch, but the rebellion was too fast. A Dominion officer lunged at Elias, a blade flashing in his hand. Elias twisted, dodging the strike before driving his own weapon into the alien's chest. The battle raged across the station. Explosions tore through corridors as the Resistance overwhelmed the defenders. Elias and his team pushed toward the command bridge, securing it within minutes. Vaughn checked the systems. We've got full control. The outpost is ours. Cheers erupted through the comms. The Dominion had just lost one of their most critical strongholds. Elias stood at the viewport, watching as Resistance ships secured the station. The war was far from over, but with every victory, humanity proved that they would never kneel again. The Dominion had ruled with fear. Now, they would learn what true defiance looked like. Smoke and fire filled the corridors of the captured Dominion outpost as Resistance forces secured the last sections. The battle had been swift but brutal. Elias Ward stood on the command deck, scanning the reports. They had won, but the real fight was still ahead. The Dominion wouldn't let this humiliation stand. Vaughn worked at a terminal, decrypting captured data. We've got something, she said. High-priority orders sent before we disabled their systems. It's bad. Elias and Cole leaned in as Vaughn projected a hologram. A massive Dominion fleet was regrouping, converging on a single location. The Dominion had been momentarily blinded by the relay's destruction, but now they were adapting. Elias clenched his jaw. They're preparing a counterattack. Worse, Vaughn added. They're gathering at Praxis 5. Cole swore. That's a prison planet. Elias exhaled sharply. Praxis 5 was a nightmare, a Dominion facility where captured rebels were sent to disappear. If the Dominion was rallying there, it meant one thing. They're going to make an example of the prisoners, Elias said. Public executions. A message to the rebellion. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Friends, allies, people who had fought and bled for freedom, would be slaughtered to break humanity's spirit. Cole crossed his arms. We don't have the numbers for a full assault. Then we don't assault, Elias said. We infiltrate. The plan formed quickly. They would use the stolen Phantom-class ship to slip past Dominion defenses, land undetected, and break out as many prisoners as possible. It was insane, but they had no other choice. 5 hours later, Elias, Vaughn, and a small team were inside the Phantom, racing toward Praxis 5. The prison loomed ahead, a dark metal fortress surrounded by planetary defenses. The Dominion fleet hung in orbit, warships on high alert. Vaughn activated the ship's stealth systems. So far, so good. They slipped past outer patrols, descending toward a remote section of the prison complex. The Phantom landed in a maintenance bay, and the team moved fast. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of damp metal and suffering. Guards patrolled the dim corridors, unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows. Elias and his team moved like ghosts, taking down sentries with precise shots. They reached the central control room, where Vaughn hacked into the security systems. Her fingers flew across the interface. I've got the cell blocks unlocked, but we have a problem. What is it? Elias asked. She turned to him, face grim. The Dominion knows something's wrong. We've got minutes before reinforcements arrive. Elias activated his calm all teams, get the prisoners moving. We don't have time. The prison erupted into chaos. Cells hissed open, and emaciated prisoners stumbled into the halls, eyes filled with confusion and fear. Resistance fighters directed them toward escape routes as alarms blared. Dominion guards swarmed the corridors, firing indiscriminately. The Resistance returned fire, covering the prisoners' retreat. Explosions rocked the facility as sabotage charges detonated, further disorienting the defenders. Elias led a group through the smoke-filled halls, cutting down any enemy that stood in their way. They had reached the final exit when a towering Dominion warden blocked their path, an energy blade humming in his grip. Elias barely dodged the first strike, the weapon slicing through the air where his head had been. He countered with a precise shot, but the warden's armor absorbed it. The alien swung again. Elias ducked, rolling aside and drawing his combat knife. The warden lunged, Elias sidestepped, slashing across its exposed neck. The blade found a weak spot, and the warden collapsed. Vaughn's voice crackled in his earpiece. Elias, we need to go. Now. He turned to see transports loading prisoners, Resistance ships breaking through Dominion defenses to extract them. Their window was closing. Elias sprinted toward the Phantom, covering the last group as they boarded. Vaughn gunned the engines, and the ship roared into the sky, dodging incoming fire as it ascended. The Dominion fleet moved to intercept, but Resistance ships provided cover, hammering enemy vessels. The Phantom punched through the blockade, entering hyperspace just as explosions erupted behind them. The mission was a success. Hundreds of prisoners were free. The Dominion had failed to make an example of humanity. As the Phantom sped toward the Resistance stronghold, Elias knew this war was far from over. But with every battle, humanity proved one thing. They would never be broken. The stolen Phantom-class ship emerged from hyperspace, its hull scarred from battle. Inside, Elias Ward and his team sat in silence, exhaustion weighing on them. The mission to Praxis 5 had been a success, but the war was far from over. The Resistance had freed hundreds of prisoners, yet the Dominion still ruled over humanity with an iron grip. Vaughn checked the ship's systems. We took a beating, but we're still flying. I'll start repairs when we dock. Elias nodded. The Resistance's hidden base was only minutes away. Their next move had to be decisive. The Dominion would strike back, and if humanity wasn't ready, they would be crushed. As the Phantom approached the asteroid base, Resistance fighters greeted them with cheers. The rescued prisoners stepped off the ship, some falling to their knees, overwhelmed by their first taste of freedom in years. Cole met Elias at the docking bay, arms crossed. Hell of a mission. The Dominion's going to lose its mind over this. Good, Elias said. Let them. They need to know we're not afraid. Cole smirked. Well, they've already responded. He gestured for Elias to follow. They walked through the base, past mechanics refueling ships and soldiers preparing for the next fight. In the command center, holographic projections flickered with intercepted Dominion transmissions. Vaughn's face was pale as she pulled up the latest data. We've confirmed reports of Dominion reinforcements. They're sending their elite force, the Obsidian Guard. Elias tensed. The Obsidian Guard was no ordinary fleet. These were the Dominion's most ruthless enforcers, warriors who had crushed entire rebellions before. They're heading for Earth, Vaughn continued. Full planetary lockdown. Any suspected rebels will be executed. Any world that harbors sympathizers will be purged. Cole exhaled sharply. They're trying to end this war before it spreads. Elias clenched his fists. The Dominion was scared. And that fear made them even more dangerous. If Earth fell completely under their control, the Resistance would lose its heart. Then we take the fight to them, Elias said. Cole raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting we hit Earth? That's suicide. Not if we strike first, Elias countered. The Dominion expects us to run, to stay hidden. But if we cripple their forces before they can reinforce Earth, we might have a chance. Vaughn pulled up star maps. Their fleet is mobilizing near Velker Prime. If we attack there, we could delay their assault on Earth. It was risky. The Resistance's fleet was growing, but it was nothing compared to the Dominion's armada. Elias turned to Cole. We don't have the numbers, but we have something they don't. We fight like hell. Cole smirked. You're insane. But you're right. Orders were sent. Ships were prepped. The Resistance was no longer running. They were going to war. 12 hours later, the Resistance fleet dropped out of hyperspace over Velker Prime. The Dominion fleet, still regrouping, was caught off guard. Elias sat in the captain's chair of a captured Dominion cruiser, leading the assault. All ships, target their command vessels first. Break their coordination. The battle ignited in an instant. Human warships weaved through the Dominion formation, striking hard and fast. Explosions rocked the void as Resistance fighters tore through enemy squadrons. Elias watched as the Dominion's formation crumbled. The loss of their command relay and outposts had left them slow to adapt. The Resistance was exploiting every weakness. But the Dominion wouldn't go down easily. The Obsidian Guard's flagship entered the battle, a colossal dreadnought bristling with weapons. It unleashed a devastating barrage, tearing through Resistance ships. Elias knew they couldn't outgun it. They had to outthink it. Vaughn, can we disable that thing? She analyzed the data. Their power core is vulnerable, but we'd have to get close. Elias grinned. Then let's get close. The captured Dominion cruiser maneuvered through the chaos, dodging incoming fire. Vaughn overloaded the ship's engines, pushing them to the limit. We're almost in position, she said. The dreadnought's weapons locked onto them. Elias activated the comms. All remaining ships, focus fire on their shields. Give us an opening. The Resistance fleet obeyed. Concentrated fire battered the dreadnought's defenses. For a brief moment, its shields flickered. Now, Elias commanded. Vaughn fired everything. Torpedoes, beam cannons, railguns, every weapon the ship had. The dreadnought's power core erupted in a cataclysmic explosion. The shockwave tore through the battlefield. The remaining Dominion ships, leaderless and scattered, began to retreat. Elias let out a breath. They had won. The battle for Earth was coming. And humanity would be ready. The Resistance fleet drifted through the wreckage of the Dominion's forces. The battle over Velker Prime had been a decisive victory, but there was no time to celebrate. Elias Ward stood on the bridge of the captured Dominion cruiser, watching as his crew worked tirelessly. They had struck a major blow, but the war was far from over. Vaughn checked the tactical displays. The Dominion forces are pulling back, but they won't stay down for long. The survivors will regroup. Elias nodded. And when they do, they'll throw everything they have at Earth. Cole's voice crackled over the comms. If we're going to defend Earth, we need to get back now. The Dominion will have reinforcements en route already. Elias turned to his crew. Set course for Earth. Maximum speed. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. Every second counted. Hours later, the Resistance forces emerged over Earth. The sight before them sent a chill down Elias' spine. The Dominion was already there. A blockade of warships encircled the planet, their weapons aimed downward. Ground forces had already landed, their iron grip tightening around the last free cities. Cole's voice came through. They beat us here. Elias took a deep breath. Then we fight. The Resistance fleet accelerated, weapons charging. Dominion ships moved to intercept, unleashing a hail of plasma fire. The battle erupted in an instant. Human warships wove through the enemy ranks, striking hard and fast. Explosions lit up the void as Resistance fighters outmaneuvered Dominion interceptors. But the Dominion was ready. Their warships formed a defensive wall, forcing the Resistance into a brutal engagement. Vaughn scanned the battlefield. We can't break through. Their formation is too strong. Elias gritted his teeth. Then we changed the game. He studied the Dominion fleet, looking for a weakness. Then he saw it. The command carrier, an enormous vessel directing the blockade. If they took it out, the Dominion forces would lose coordination. Target that carrier, Elias ordered. We take it down, and we have a shot. Resistance ships focused fire on the massive vessel, hammering its shields. The carrier returned fire, devastating smaller ships, but the Resistance pressed on. Vaughn monitored the damage. Their shields are holding, but if we hit their engines, we might be able to cripple them. Elias grinned. Then let's hit their engines. He directed the fleet to concentrate fire on the carrier's propulsion systems. Explosions erupted along its hull, and its engines flickered. The massive ship began to drift. The Dominion fleet hesitated. Their coordination faltered. Elias saw his chance. All ships, push forward. Break their lines. The Resistance fleet surged ahead, punching through the Dominion's defenses. Human warships rained destruction on the blockade, tearing apart enemy vessels. On the ground, the people of Earth saw the battle unfold. Hope ignited in their hearts. Across the planet, the Resistance rose. Cities erupted in rebellion. Trapped military units broke free and joined the fight. The Dominion's occupation was crumbling. But the battle wasn't over yet. The Dominion's final weapon came online. A planetary annihilation cannon, built into a dreadnought in high orbit. Vaughn's face paled. If that thing fires, Earth is gone. Elias' mind raced. They had minutes, maybe less. Cole's voice came through. We have one shot. We take out that dreadnought, or we lose everything. Elias turned to Vaughn. Can we get close enough for a direct strike? She hesitated, then nodded. It'll be tight, but we can do it. Elias activated the comms. All remaining ships, cover us. We're taking that thing down. The captured Dominion cruiser sped toward the dreadnought, dodging incoming fire. The Resistance fleet provided cover, sacrificing ships to keep their path clear. The dreadnought's cannon charged, glowing with apocalyptic energy. Vaughn's voice was tense. Almost there. Elias clenched his fists. Ready all weapons. Fire everything. Missiles, beam cannons, torpedoes, all unleashed at once. The dreadnought's shield shattered. The Resistance's final salvo struck the reactor. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the dreadnought exploded in a blinding fireball. The shockwave rippled across the battlefield. The Dominion forces, leaderless and broken, began to retreat. The blockade crumbled. Elias slumped back in his chair, exhaling. We did it. Across Earth, the people cheered. The Dominion had been defeated. But Elias knew the war wasn't over. The Dominion still controlled much of the galaxy. This was just the beginning. The skies above Earth were filled with wreckage. The once mighty Dominion blockade was shattered, their forces in full retreat. Across the planet, Resistance forces overwhelmed the remaining occupiers, reclaiming their cities. Humanity had won its greatest battle, but Elias Ward knew this war was far from over. Standing on the bridge of the captured Dominion cruiser, he watched the last Dominion ships jump to hyperspace. Vaughn stood beside him, scanning the tactical displays. They're falling back to their nearest stronghold. But they won't stay down for long. Cole's voice crackled over the comms. We hit them hard, but they still control most of the galaxy. If they regroup, they'll come back stronger. Elias knew Cole was right. The Dominion had underestimated humanity, and they had paid the price. But now, they would see humans as a real threat. The next battle wouldn't be one of desperation, it would be a full-scale war. Vaughn turned from the console. We intercepted their emergency transmissions. The Dominion High Command is already planning a counterattack. Elias exhaled. Then we don't give them time to recover. Cole smirked. I was hoping you'd say that. Elias activated the comms, addressing every Resistance ship in the fleet. Today, we reclaimed our home. But this war isn't over. The Dominion still thinks they can rule us. Still thinks they can break us. Silence fell over the comms as every pilot, every soldier, listened. They thought we would kneel. Instead, we rose. They thought we would break. Instead, we fought. And now, we take the fight to them. A cheer erupted through the fleet. Elias turned to his crew. Set course for the Dominion's nearest stronghold. We're not done yet. Vaughn smiled. Let's remind them why humanity was never meant to be conquered. As the fleet prepared for its next mission, Elias looked down at Earth one last time. The planet was battered but unbroken. The Dominion had tried to crush humanity's spirit, but they had only forged something stronger. This wasn't just a battle for survival anymore. This was a war for freedom. And humanity would never stop fighting.